As at the time of this recording, it's been a little over 2 years since I reviewed the Caligula Effect Overdose for the PlayStation 4, and a little over 4 years since I covered the original Caligula Effect for the PlayStation Vita. Where is the time gone? Well, today we're going to look at the sequel with the Caligula Effect 2. For transparency, a copy of the game was provided to me courtesy of the publisher, and this review will contain spoilers for the Caligula Effect, obviously being its sequel, as well as some out-of-context spoilers for the Caligula Effect 2's plot. I will keep the major spoilers and secrets as they are, a secret for full enjoyment. It is also best that you complete the Caligula Effect Overdose as there are many references to it. The Caligula Effect 2 is set 5 years after the events of the first game, and humanity is faced with another problem. After the incident with Mew and Mobius, another virtual vocal program or Virtuadoll has appeared. Named Regret, she has created a world called Redo for people to escape reality. So in other words, another Virtuadoll has pretty much done the exact same thing as what Mew did 5 years earlier. The people trapped in this world are comatose in real life, and the phenomenon has been called Astral Syndrome, in which this is the second mass case of it. Of course, people think that Mew is behind it, so they've started blaming her again. In the second game, which I'll just shorten to Caligula 2, you can play as a male or female main character whom you can name, and they are one of the people trapped in Redo. Your character starts having dreams in this virtual world, which is a sign that the world that they're in isn't real, and as they get confused over starting to see things for what they really are, they meet up with Key, another Virtuadoll and Mew's child who has infiltrated Redo in order to help the people trapped inside. In order to fight against the corrupted inhabitants known as Digiheads and controlled inhabitants known as Puppet Heads, Key unlocks the catharsis effect of your character, symbolising their desire to leave Redo. This manifests itself as a weapon for you to fight back. As you proceed through the game, you'll encounter and meet up with others who will come to the realisation that the world isn't real and will fight alongside you to defeat Regret, her Obligato musicians, that's a musical term by the way, and to rescue everyone from Redo as the second incarnation of the Go Home Club. Like the first Caligula game, there is a large focus on tackling social problems with, of course, a large focus on lingering regrets. But is this game any good? Find out in The Good. The game retains the imaginary chain system from Caligula Overdose. How the system works is that each character selects their attack and inputs it into a timeline. A simulation plays on the assumption that the attacks are guaranteed to hit the enemy. You can also see what the enemy is planning and set up defences or counters to minimise damages to you and to your party. Each character's attacks and skills do cost SP, so when you run low, make sure you're in a position where it's safe to recharge it or use an item. As you fight stronger enemies, like Caligula Overdose, your character's accuracy is penalised, and you get an indicator of the accuracy rate in the top left corner when you plan your attacks in the timeline. Damaging enemies will raise their risk meter up to levels of 5. Once they surpass 5, they enter a risk break mode where they are stunned and will take additional damage from your attacks. The stress meter from Overdose returns, and as your character deals and takes damage, a gauge fills up for them to perform an ultimate attack. Some deal heavy damage to enemies, while others may inflict status effects on them or buff and heal your party. Added features include the voltage meter, which fills up when you interact with things on the map and in battle, and once full, Key will reset the timeline, allowing you to instantly input your moves again whilst singing a song. As you beat the Obligato musicians, you will unlock their songs for Key to sing, and depending on what song you've been playing, they provide you with benefits. You can also upgrade Key's ability so that the gauge will fill faster, as well as other benefits such as extended time or shorter cooldowns, for example, using key points which you obtain from certain chests guarded by very powerful enemies, beating bosses, or completing certain side quests, as well as minuscule amounts and shards that you can break on the map. Each character in your team has a role, and if you utilise your teams correctly, you'll tend to find that most of your battles are straightforward and easily manageable. One thing I noticed that they have taken away though is enemies wandering into the fights. When you make contact with an enemy, any other enemies in a certain distance will join as opposed to wandering in and joining the battle, which I'll miss. The battle system I personally think is quite an improvement over Caligula Overdoses. One of the biggest strengths to the Caligula games has always been its characters and character development during and outside of the main story. While Caligula 2 has removed the ability to have recruitable NPCs, which admittedly was a good but flawed idea, it does make interacting with them and completing their requests a lot easier. Some NPCs may ask you to get certain items for them, use certain items in battle, and even fight enemies in a particular way. A lot of them you'll unconsciously unlock as you play through the story, and by turning in these requests, you may be rewarded with items or money, and your main character's base attributes will increase. You'll also unlock an NPC's trauma, which gives you a little bit of insight as to why they're in Redo. Certain NPCs even have their own side quest arcs within a group. These ones often require you to have certain passive skills equipped, which you can usually find in the form of equipable amplifications in areas you visit throughout the game. Passive skills can enhance your abilities or skills, and as you battle you gain skill points that go towards mastering the skill. Once the skill has been mastered, you can equip up to 6 passive skills to your character without the need to equip the appropriate amplification. In terms of your fellow Go Home Club members, you increase your friendship levels with them by fighting alongside them, and as you progress through the story, you can unlock scenes with them which ultimately allows you to see why they've entered Redo, as well as helping them resolve their problems. You do have to be careful with that, as you can incorrectly answer their questions and lock their story progression. Thankfully, for 10 key points you can redo the scenario to successfully complete it. There's even little things I like, such as the train carriage which acts as the Go Home Club's base, getting more stuff in it as you recruit more members. Redo as a world does have its similarities to Mobius from the first game. Unlike Mobius, where its inhabitants are living their ideal lives, Redo, hence the name of the world, and its Virtuadoll Regret, plays a bigger focus on characters' regrets and their intentions to redo a part of their lives. Without spoiling the story, I found it was pretty enjoyable, and the more simplified and streamlined causality link to befriend the game's NPCs is a huge improvement over the first game and overdoses. I was given more of an incentive to complete requests, and I did enjoy seeing what everyone's regrets were. Hell, I really enjoyed the updates to the game's wire messaging system, which was one of my biggest complaints in the last game. Topics can be unlocked and found throughout exploring the map, completing requests, and through the lottery in Station Square, and there is a much broader variety of topics, and more importantly, they make sense, so no more asking characters if they're familiar with asparagus. Of course, I can't talk about Caligula without talking about the game's main strength, its music. Caligula 2's got some pretty banger hits, and it pretty much follows the first game in that regard. With the exception of Station Square's main plaza, each area will play an instrumental version of one of the Obbligato musician's songs. Once you enter battle, it flows beautifully into a vocal version sung by Regret. Once the musician is beaten, as I mentioned earlier, you unlock Key's version of the song, which is played when you activate the voltage gauge. I do enjoy both Regret and Key's versions of the songs, as well as a remixed version which plays when you fight the musician as a boss fight. If you enjoyed the vocal versions, you can unlock them and play them through the jukebox back at base. This rounds off the things I liked about the game, so let's look at what I didn't like in the bad. While I did praise the changes to the wire system earlier in the review, there's still a minor issue I have with it. Despite all the variety of topics available and the improvements, what is still the point of it? It's still you asking a question and receiving a generic answer just to jump to a completely different question altogether. Having a conversation where you express interest and even follow up in conversation topics of NPCs would make me feel closer to them, but like in the first game, it's more of a gimmick than anything still for the most part. Your club members do have personalised questions as you complete their story, and you can unlock more about them this way, but the only time I really used wire in the game was just to check and see what to do next, as there's some pretty good banter between the club members which I enjoyed. NPCs, like in the previous game, you only really need to talk to in order to complete their requests before you discard them and never talk to them again, except for the odd time where they may have a present for you. That was a new thing I admittedly liked, but hunting them down just to find the exact NPC to talk to in certain areas was a pain. You know, while we're on the topic about getting to know characters better, I really liked the approach Caligula Overdose had with you siding with the Ostinato musicians and getting to know and empathise with them. I wish the same could be said in this game, where you could perhaps go against the Go Home Club and maybe even help the Obbligato musicians overcome their regrets in parallel to quash the efforts of the club and keep everyone in Redo. You don't have to go through Caligula Overdose's method, where it was painfully obvious who the mysterious bad guy, in other words you, are, as Key shares souls with you. But perhaps rejecting Key from the start of the game will get her to bond with someone else while you get recruited into the Obbligato musicians' ranks and get your powers from Regret. That would make for a good parallel story. You'll get to find out a little bit more of what makes the Obbligato musicians tick, but to get the full story it does require you to beat the game, depending on ending. Nonetheless, I don't think there was anything else I didn't really like about the game, so it's about time I give the opinion. The Caligula Effect 2 is a big improvement over the Vita original and even the Caligula Effect Overdose. If you've played Overdose, a lot of the core features such as the imaginary chain battle system mostly remains the same, and the new stuff complements it really well. The game's storytelling, character development and music are still its strong points, and the game mostly addresses issues I've had with Overdose. The game's wire system still feels a little generic to me, though not as much as it did in the previous games, and the lack of a parallel story mode that made Overdose pretty cool by siding with the bad guys and getting to learn more about them from their point of view, instead of having to finish the game, depending on ending, to find out would have been good in this game. If you're into JRPGs and if you enjoyed Persona, I think you'll get some mileage out of this game, considering the scenario was written by Tadashi Satomi, who was the writer for Revelations Persona and both versions of Persona 2. I enjoyed my time with this game and I look forward to seeing where things go from here. So with that, it's time for my rating. I would give the Caligula Effect 2 whatever this thing is, out of 10. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next Infinite Backlog review. If you enjoyed today's review, feel free to check out some of our other videos and subscribe for more. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram and our Facebook page. Once again, thank you for watching.